Good afternoon. My name is Hitesh Mehta, and my presentation is entitled Cradle to Cradle, a life cycle approach to addressing climate emergency. I would like to begin by giving you an introduction about my history with climate change. I grew up in the wonderful neighborhood of Parklands under concrete roofs. From there, I went to Kijabe Street, again under concrete roofs. And I studied at the ADD, which is this brutalist concrete architecture. Whilst in my final year, when I was doing my thesis, I went to the coast of Kenya and studied the building technology and materials on the coast. After architecture school, I went to California at Berkeley to study landscape architecture. And it is there that I did a presentation called Comfortably Numb. And it was in 1988 that I first started talking about problems with global warming. I returned back to Kenya and started working on climatic design, architecture and landscape architecture, and ended up using a lot of local materials and convection cooling, etc. I then returned back to the US, where I wrote several books. My first one was International Ecology Guidelines, and the foreword of this book was written by a very famous US architect called Bill McDonough, who at the same time was writing his now very famous book called Cradle to Cradle, which is the main topic of my presentation. I continued spreading the good word around the world about climate change in over like 25, 30 countries. And as you know, the situation has gotten from bad to worse to worst. You can see how the global temperatures have just gone up over the last 140 years. As we speak today, the issues are being encountered everywhere in the world. 4 years ago, I was at the General Assembly at the American Society of Landscape Architects and made a presentation about climate change and showed a project that I did at Naboisho Conservancy near Masai Mara. So, what is climate emergency? Climate change is actually gone. It's the past. We are beyond it. We are now in a state of climate emergency. Mother Earth is no longer in the general ward. Mother Earth is right now in the ICU. Global warming has caused warm waters, which has resulted in coral bleaching. There are extreme floods taking place all over the world. They are increasing in frequency and intensity. Even today, right today, people are dying in northern Italy from floods. And the floods just came straight after some drought. And we have seen that in Kenya as well. Hurricanes, huge problem created by the climate change, and now it's become an emergency. One of my ecologists I worked on got totally damaged by the hurricanes. Fires, famine, we have seen it in Kenya, the whole of northern Kenya. I was there last year in November, and then of course working on a project in the Amboseli area. and people and livestock are suffering. These are interesting photographs taken before COVID and during COVID. Left is before COVID, the air pollution created by global warming issues, and on the right is during COVID. Same thing here you see in Los Angeles. Look how clean the air is on the right hand side. More than 1 million plant and animal species are at risk of extinction because of the myriad ways humans are changing the earth by farming, fishing, logging, mining, poaching, and burning of fossil fuels. If greenhouse gas emissions remain on current trajectories, research shows that abrupt collapses in tropical oceans will begin in the next decade. This is a beautiful graphic to really get to show people the problem we are in today. You can see in the 1990s when you're driving a car, all these insects hitting our window screens. By 2020, the insects and everything are gone. And by 2050, even the humans are gone. And we really need to take this graphic seriously. This polar bear is giving us a message. This New York Times graphic is telling us what we should be doing as humans. Not raping the planet, but taking care of it. So what about climate emergency and building materials? The buildings and construction sector accounted for 36% of final energy use and 39% of energy and process related carbon dioxide emissions in 2018. It got much better during COVID, but we are now back to even in a worse situation. We may be even up to 40% right now. 11% of all of this resulted from manufacturing building materials and products such as steel, cement, and glass. Let's take a couple of projects around the world. Let's see what's happening. Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. SOM, the architects, using very sexy language to try and talk about their design philosophy. They talk about how this whole project was inspired by a flower, the Hymenocallis flower. But when you look into do some more research, you find out this flower only exists in Central and South America. So I don't see the connection between South America and the Arabian desert. This building used up 31,400 metric tons of steel bar. 10,000 tons of cooling per hour is required. Almost 1 million liters of water a day. And you look at the electricity used from all the bulbs they have or the dancing fountains. And you realize this is one of the most uneco projects on the planet. During the Chinese Olympics, everybody was talking about how amazing these stadiums were. But were they from an environmental point of view, from climate change, from climate emergency? The bird's nest alone used up 110,000 tons of steel. The water cube used up 100,000 square meters of a fluorocarbon-based polymer, highly toxic. For the beach volleyball, they transported 17,000 tons of sand from Hainan, which on a normal case would have been illegal to do. Or they talk about how the stadiums are built out of alloy boards and they help conserve energy on the inside. But what about during the production of these materials? How much energy has been used? How many greenhouse gases have gone into the atmosphere through the production? And we are right now, everybody, there's a huge trend going on around the world. Everybody wants to look like Dubai or New York. All these sort of phallic symbols, glass buildings everywhere, concrete. Panama City, Doha, Wuhan, Singapore. By the way, all of these photographs are part of my research, and I have been there personally to see them. And when you look at projects like this, they're just full glass buildings in a tropical setting, concrete everywhere. This is not good for the environment. Petronas Towers and Dubai. I don't know what to say about it. So what are we going to do about it as architects, as people in the construction industry? Eco-design is an answer. But to learn about it, let's go to our ancestors, our closest ancestors. We share 98.4% of our DNA with the chimpanzees. And look how similar they look to us. When they build their houses, they do not destroy the environment around them. We share 97.4% DNA with the gorillas, our second cousins. When they build their houses, well, there is really no damage to the environment. That's where they lay over a whole night. You look at birds, when they build again, that even the weakest twig is not destroyed. And it is aesthetically pleasing, it is beautiful, it is eco-friendly. When bees build their hives, look at the magic. Termite mounds, when they build their houses, they are in harmony with the environment. They look like they are one. And aesthetically, very well done. When ants build highways, they do not destroy the earth. They do not create global gas emissions like we do. Everything works in nature. There's beautiful eco-design and eco-planning. So why can't we learn from that? When you look at from an architectural point of view, there are many things we could do to make a project ecologically friendly and have as less as global greenhouse emissions as possible. The one I'm going to concentrate on, because it actually provides the highest amount of global gas emissions on any project, is the sustainable technology and materials. So when you look at a particular house or a building, there are so many components which we really should be looking at to make a project, totally holistic. And one of those, of course, is the use of environmentally friendly materials. So when it comes to building materials, there's a concept called embodied energy. Embodied energy is a calculation of all the energy that is used to produce a material or product, including mining, manufacture, and transport. To achieve a building that is truly low energy, it is important to consider embodied energy when choosing materials and construction systems. So this is a great little graphic that shows from the moment that you start as materials, then you start working on the design, and then you start working on the production and the manufacturing. Then you do transportation. It's taken to the site where it is used, and from the site, after 20, 30 years, the building is demolished or whatever, it's disposed. This is what we call a cradle to crave approach. In every single part of this process, energy is used. And when this energy is used, greenhouse gases are sent to the sky. And that's where we have problems with climate change. And that is why we are now in a state of climate emergency. It's very important as architects, as professionals in the construction industry, to understand carbon. The embodied carbon, when from the moment it's been manufactured and it is transported to the site and the construction has been done, to the operational carbon, which is when the building has been built. And then, of course, it's to do with air conditioning systems and everything that uses, light bulbs and everything. So when you look at embodied energy, there are some materials that have far more energy embodied in it, and which of course means that it causes the highest amount of global greenhouse emissions. Concrete, number one. Steel, plastic, masonry, all of these have embodied energy in it. So when you are selecting materials, you want to be selecting those materials that have the least embodied energy in it, so that you can make sure that you are being kind to Mother Earth. You are not sinking it as a designer. You are not destroying it. Cradle to Cradle is a design philosophy that was devised by Bill McDonough, the gentleman I told you did a foreword for my first book, and his partner Michael Bronat. According to this approach, raw materials are not thrown away, like as they happen in the cradle to grave thing I showed you earlier, but they are reused indefinitely or serve as food for new products. Cradle to cradle products must therefore be remountable or fully recyclable and not contain any harmful raw materials. So it works both. It works as a biological cycle, and also as a technical cycle, and both are very important. The advantages are that this process makes products circular and reduces their environmental impacts. Cradle to Cradle does not let all products go to waste. Instead, a product's materials and components are repurposed or recycled. This keeps materials in the economic loop and saves energy during production. So it's what we call the life cycle approach to building materials, and how we make sure it's completely circular. So we use the least amount of energy. So I want to take you through two of our HM design projects where we have used embodied energy principles and the cradle to cradle philosophy. Our office, right from day one, as a holistic planning office. So we think about humans, flora, and fauna from day one of the planning and design process. Ours is an approach we call ego less, but eco more. We do not believe in Homo sapiens being the superior species, that we know it all and we can do anything to nature. No. We want to make sure that we as Homo sapiens are equally important to every species on the planet. And we like to bring in local wisdom and local knowledge on every single project of ours, especially if that knowledge is related to local construction techniques or the use of local building materials. Because using local building materials means you are having the least embodied energy. We have over the years been working on quite a few of these United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs, in particular, life on land, life below water, no poverty, zero hunger, and gender equality. And when you take all of these and others, also climate action. So the first project I'd like to take you to is one that I was the project manager for Crosswaters Eco Resort and Spa. And it was actually a project that I worked on with this company called EDSA. And you can see here um, the site of this lodge. It's about 3 hours north of Hong Kong. We did a whole master plan for this project, a site plan. And this is something so important, especially in the Kenyan situation. We now have a really good batch and some very experienced landscape architects. So please, I plead to all of you architects, bring in landscape architects on day one of the planning and design process, because they have skills that us architects do not have. For this project, we went in right at the beginning to identify the local construction skills of the people. And here we found this 80-year-old gentleman who knew how to build with rammed earth techniques. And with him and his other colleagues, we got them to start working on the rammed earth walls for the Eco Lodge. And then they taught this skills to some much younger people. And so this particular technique continues, to the next generations. And what they were doing, the Chinese they were destroying their own buildings, the mud and the brick buildings, to build, buildings with concrete and steel and glass. So what we did is we handpicked each one of these tiles, and we brought them to the Eco Lodge, and we put them in our buildings. And so when you look at that architecture, it is timeless. You can go after 100 years and it will still look very beautiful. Most importantly, it has the least embodied energy. The mud is from the site. The bamboo we used is from the site. The tiles are from the neighboring villages. And when it's all done and finished, it's one of the highest awarded projects, hospitality projects in the world. You can see the walls that we designed. Even the stones were from the river. Everything is eco-friendly. And then there's the bamboo that's grown on the site. And so we brought in the world's topmost bamboo architect, Simon Velez, who does everything by hand. So when you do all your drawings by hand and you don't use modern, all the laptops and AutoCADs and everything, you are actually conserving energy. And so what you are seeing there is we are getting now to the final construction drawings right there. That's the finished product. And he also designed the bamboo villas, and these are the construction drawings, all hand drawn. And he has got people with him from Colombia, and they teach the local Chinese how to build with bamboo. And voila. This was the first project in China that, for a rural project that was able to sell at $700 a night. It had never before happened in China, where people were paying this kind of money in rural areas. That's the first bamboo bridge to be built in the world outside of Colombia. And guess what? What you see there is the construction drawings. In fact, it was the schematic design, the design development, and the construction drawings all in one single double spread ruled notebook. That's the arrival experience. You can see the bamboo at the back. And so all the bamboo for the bridge and the buildings came straight from the site. And people arrive to this Eco Lodge by walking over the bridge, over the river, on the bridge. That's the main buildings. Even the golf cart things were reused railway ties. All the materials, planting materials were native. no exotics. Even in the landscape design, we designed 8 gardens. Everything was local. The granite was local. The bamboo was local. Even the motifs on the floor used up local stones. Beautifully done by local craftsmen. So there we are. Most of the project is actually done using local materials right from the site. And you look at the fences that were done with bamboo. And then finally we come to my house, a townhouse. I bought this in the year 2000, and um, it was built in 1982. You can see the condition it is in. And as an experiment, but also because I truly believe in it, my wife and I completely eco refurbished the whole house. Every single thing that you see there is from eco-friendly materials. You can see everything there. We spent 6 months just doing research on eco-friendly materials. So whether it is the paints on the walls, whether it's the sofas, the fact that they're not built with any, there's no foam in it, or the floors, the fact that it's all bamboo, etc., etc. Everything that you see, whether it's on the dining tables itself, the bathroom, the kitchen fittings, the bedrooms, all the wood there is eco-friendly. The chest that you see in the foreground is made from mango wood. And even the wall tiles in the kitchens, they used to be Heineken bottles, beer bottles. And these beer bottles have been turned into these tiles. That's a classic example of a cradle to cradle approach. You can see those tiles at the back. That's from, there used to be beer bottles and wine bottles. So I'd like to conclude. In 2012, the EIU came up with their livability rankings, but they added a new criteria, which was special characteristics. Special characteristics. Any guesses which was the second worst city in the world? Nairobi. When you look at what we have been doing in Nairobi for the last 15 years, you find that we are going in the same path as the Dubais, the Dohas, the Panama cities, the Singapores. Everybody wants to reach to the sky. There's, of course, like as if there's some kind of a phallic statement that we'd like to make. Concrete, glass everywhere. I don't know why the craze for glass in tropical areas. It forces you to start using air conditioning systems, which also means that much greater global greenhouse gases, climate change, climate emergency. Now you know why over 35% of global greenhouse emissions comes from the construction industry. We are chasing trees away from our urban areas completely with concrete. There is a Cree Native American proverb. Only when the last tree has died and the last river has been poisoned and the last fish been caught and the last rainforest burned to ashes will we realize we cannot eat money. The operative word here is realize. It is that realization where the problem is. In Kenya, we continue to do this using all these rhinos and ArchiCADs and everything to show this sort of very sexy kind of look, because that's where the trend is. But behind the scenes, these are the most uneco-friendly destinations, cities, villages that we are creating. We are, as professionals, the reason behind a lot of the climate emergency situations we are facing. That realization is very important. That the majority of the building profession is not practicing true stewardship and mostly giving lip service. What I am seeing is that many design professionals have become accomplices to greenhouse emissions. Our colleague Musao Kimeyu, lack of proper expertise in environmental design is largely to blame for the slow progress in green architecture in Kenya. Most experts in the field, well, I'd say so-called experts, usually incorporate an element or two of green design and then label the project green, resulting in misinformation to the general public. Let's look back at our ancestors. Here, the Maasai. For 300-400 years, they still continue to build, in many cases, not everywhere, but in many cases, they still continue to build in harmony with their surroundings. You go to Lalibela in Ethiopia, and you see the way they build the churches. Or you go to Dogon land in Mali. All these are my photographs, part of my research. And when I look at this, is when I see beautiful architecture that is in harmony with the whole universe. This is not sending global emissions, because carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Or the way they still live in Dogon land on the cliffs. Or if you go to Thimlishohinga up in Western Kenya, and you see how our ancestors lived. There's no concrete there. There's no glass there. And I know things have to change, understandably, but not where we are. 40, 50, 60 stories of concrete buildings with just total glass and steel. Look at what's in Sana'a, in Yemen, one of my favorite cities in the world. 7, 8-story buildings, just beautifully done out of mud. No air conditioning, no problems of uh, greenhouse emissions. If the design profession is to be well respected and sustainable, a new paradigm for building material and construction technique selection is needed urgently. We really need to start thinking out of the box as Kenyan architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, interior designers, landscape architects, every one of us. We need to start looking into, heat pumps are a great example, especially during the very cold months in Nairobi. And it's going to get worse and worse. We're going to have times when it's going to get really cold and other times when it's going to get really hot. So we need to be starting to think about how we are going to be using natural energy. Or, of course, the solar power uses. Or in rural areas, how can we use recycled coffee husks and make briquettes out of it and use that instead of charcoal, instead of cutting trees. And these are classic little cartoons that show that the real problem is that we as humans have not come to the realization that the earth is in the ICU, and it's because of us it is in the ICU. The mother that is feeding us is the one that we are eating at the same time. We are in denial that climate change is not there. It's a conspiracy theory. That is not true. It is very real, and we need to do something about it. And the cradle to cradle philosophy is a great way to go about it. The whole life cycle approach to planning and selecting materials is a very important thing. So thank you so much. If any of you guys have any questions regarding my presentation or want to follow up, my email is up on the screen. And I appreciate the time that you guys have taken to hear me out. Asante sana, kwaheri kuonana.